Hello and welcome to the Temple Mount Podcast. I am Shogun, and joining me today is my father, Hawthorne Waxwing, friend from the server also. This will be really the first of our in-person video podcasts we'll be doing with different members, and also Crimson Raven, who's also on video, came and visited both of us out here in Kelowna. We spent some time together, so we're going to talk about that, as well as any updates to the Oak Island mysteries, the Templar, and any other things we might want to get into. That being said, make sure you join the Temple Mount Discord server. Make sure you subscribe to the official YouTube channel, and there you can find links to all our other channels on SoundCloud, BitChute, and Odyssey. That being said, welcome, Hawthorne. Thank you for joining me, and thank you also for hosting us at your place.
Thank you. It was really fascinating to get Crimson and Shogun here together at my home, and I hope we can duplicate that in the future with you, Crimson, and maybe others from the community who would love to visit this little oasis in the mountains.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a wonderful time out there visiting. It was fantastic. Me and Shogun had a good time. We connected, on like a spiritual level, and became even better friends, and we learned a lot about each other. And ultimately, I believe all of it is part of this like spiral code process. Right, and this one of the things I believe that our meeting was the unification of our two timelines into one timeline by sharing the same space.
Cool, I appreciate that, and it was kind of synergistic, I think, for both of us to meet you, and for me, it's been a great way to reconnect with the Temple Mount community, and. So I'll just leave it there. And do you want to set it up?
Well, yeah, we had a great visit. Thanks for having us out, and we can do it again in the future. We're in British Columbia or Manitoba, and we'll try and organize more Temple Mount meetups. Now that the COVID thing seems to be largely behind us, we wanted to do things like this for a long time, and obviously it just wasn't really possible with all the vaccine nonsense. But that being said, we could talk more about the trip. Also, we've done 2 podcasts before. If you haven't heard them on Oak Island, you can find them both on the Temple Mount official YouTube channel. Really, really interesting topic. So,
why don't we start there? Just because I'm kind of ready to go on that one, and then we can loop back around to more personal stuff.
I think so.
Okay.
So, has there been? I mean, again, if you haven't heard about it, I'll give just the TLDR: mysterious island in Canada, believed to hold some kind of unknown treasure, incredibly sophisticated system of tunnels and traps and pits to hide it, and people have been excavating it. There's all kind of theories that we've gotten into about what might be down there, but my father follows the case much more closely. So has there been any additional developments or anything else updates?
Yeah. So here's a really 2-minute synopsis of we did probably 2 or 3 hours of in the first and second session podcast that I did, but to distill it, there is an island off the coast of Nova Scotia in a place called Mahone Bay. The name of it is Oak Island, and there's a treasure hunt going on there. They call it the world's longest duration treasure hunt. The hunt for the treasure has been going on since the year 1795. And after 225 years of searching, we still do not know who put the treasure there or what the treasure is, and no treasure has been found. Mm-hmm. Now, if you really want to delve into this, the History Channel has a series that is about to enter its 10th season, 10 years. They have been doing kind of a live, real life video series about the hunt for the treasure on Oak Island. And you can Google that and watch all the episodes if you want. But the bottom line is this. In 1795, some young men in a rowboat came up on this island, and they found an oak tree with a block and tackle hanging off of it over a pit. And because there's a history of pirate treasure being buried all over Nova Scotia, they thought, great, we'll dig this hole and find some treasure. They dug down and they found a wooden platform. They dug down every 10 feet. They found another platform. It went down 90 feet, and they found a stone. When they removed the stone, there was an inscription on it, and the tunnel flooded, and they were never able to find out what was below that level. So that was 1795. Ever since then, different teams of people have been digging up stuff and finding extensive works, architecture that was done to create a subterranean structure. But the purpose of which is still unknown. The obvious reason you would do something so complex would be to hide an incredibly valuable treasure. So the questions are, who did it, when did they do it, and most importantly, what was the point of creating this incredibly complex underground architecture in, of all places, prehistoric North America? Okay, so I hope that kind of sets the scene for it. And if you really want to know the whole backstory, it's in the 2 previous podcasts that we devoted to this. So I've talked about this for a couple of hours already. And actually, it's funny. I just pulled out my notes today, and they've got I got this whole timeline going on and stuff, because it's a really complex story. But here's the connection to Temple Mount, in short. The predominant theory in the History Channel series is that the depositors of the treasure on Oak Island were the Knights Templar. That is, who had the capacity to do this and who had the motivation to do it. And so that is the thesis that the History Channel is pursuing, and the evidence seems to be lining up behind that thesis. There are other theses. Oh, low battery.
That's okay.
Okay.
That'll be good.
The idea of pirate treasure, right? Pirates have hidden treasure all over the coast of North America, and especially in Nova Scotia. When you think about it, a lot of the buccaneers, or they called them privateers, were licensed by the British Crown to steal Spanish and other treasure, and they could bring it back to England for a commission. They'd split the treasure with the Crown. But if you had a whole boatload of gold, you might want to offload it at the last point of departure from North America before you go to England, and then you got half of the booty in England and all of the booty that you hid in Nova Scotia. So there are many, many stories in Maine and New England and down the northern coast of the United States about people finding pirate buried treasure. However, pirates tended to dig a hole and put the stuff in and put a rock on it and carve an X in it. This is where the Oak Island architecture really belies the notion that a bunch of pirates might have done this, stop for a few days in a bay somewhere, dig a hole. For example, they've excavated down to 150 feet deep on this little island in the ocean. So think about that. That's like a 15 or 18-story building down under sea level, and it's all cribbed in wood. And also they booby-trapped it with diagonal tunnels that brought seawater into it. So if you dug down below a certain level, the whole shaft would flood. And if you were lucky to get out with your life, you would certainly never find the treasure. So think about the complexity of digging those tunnels and cribbing them all with wood and stone, and all of the wood had to be hand-hewn. So you need an incredibly large workforce to do this. And yet there's no evidence left behind of who those people were. It's almost like they were operating with a discipline that transcends the value of stolen gold, like mere money or lucre. So this kind of supports the notion of the Knights Templar as a religious order. Excuse me, I gotta sneeze. Or a faith-based order that they could maintain a discipline among the workers such that they wouldn't leave trash around. There is to be no evidence that we were here. Another piece, and I'm operating on the assumption that anyone's really interested in this will have watched episode 1 or 2, so I'm not giving all the backstory, okay? But they've uncovered an incredibly complex network of, there's a stone wharf that's about 500 feet long. There are stone roadways that go all over this little island, and they found more than a dozen ox shoes on the island, okay? Why? This means you had to import oxen from England, build a network of roads on this little tiny island, and what are you using the oxen for? Well, you're hauling something around, right? What are you hauling around and why?
I'm going to grab my portable charger to plug it in to continue.
Okay,
so
continue. I'll keep ranting. And bring that yellow extension cord too, if you can. So again, also all of this stuff was buried several feet under debris, and it seems like it was filled over, like intentionally to hide it, so no one could ever find this stuff. There's also a swamp that I spoke of in the previous edition, and the swamp seems to be artificially created in order to hide a ship. That is, they brought a ship into a bay, they sunk it and burned it, and they built a cofferdam across the front, which filled with water to hide the remains of the ship, so that no one could ever even find the remains of the ship that they burned in the bay, in the swamp. So this complex infrastructure, both this above ground network of roads and the 150-foot below ground tunnel system, it just screams for some better understanding of what the hell is going on here, because it wasn't a bunch of pirates running in there to bury some chests of gold before they went to see the Queen of England, if you know what I mean. And also they've discovered human bones, like fragments of human bone that they brought up from 150 feet down in the earth, that they were able to DNA test and kind of determine or ascertain that they were from two different individuals. They found two bone chips, if you will. One from a European and the other from a Middle Eastern individual. And again, how could there be human bones 150 feet underground in the North America that Columbus hadn't discovered yet? Like, that's so we have to throw out our whole preconception of what the prehistory of North America, if you will. If by prehistory we mean pre-1492, right? Pre-Christopher Columbus. All of this had to happen earlier than that. So this summer, the summer of 2022, the team that is doing the excavation, led by Rick and Marty Lagina, the Lagina brothers, who actually own or have the rights to the entire island now, are doing the big dig. And this is a kind of a fun thing that they just added at the end of last season. There's something called muon particles, which radiate from the cosmos and go right through the Earth. And you can use them like cosmic X-rays. And they use it in the mining industry, where you just run a shaft down, say 1,000 feet. You run a sensor to the bottom, and it picks up all these muon particles and basically gives you an X-ray of the ground around your shaft. So they've done this all over Oak Island this past winter, and they're using the data they got this summer because it gives you an actual X-ray of the substructure of the entire island, so they know exactly where to dig. And so this summer they're using that data to hyper focus their excavation efforts, so that they get um, they get a result. They get an answer to those three crucial questions: who did it? When did they do it? I mean, why did they do it? Obviously, and what the hell were they hiding?
So they were probably closer
that series
than they've
will
ever.
air this fall. Go ahead.
They were probably closer now than they ever have been in discovering
Exactly.
this treasure.
And just to give you context, in season 1, if you watch the last episode, they found nothing all year long, and on the very last day, using a metal detector, they found a single Spanish piece of 8 in the swamp. That was the whole output of year 1, okay? And there's always been a lingering suspicion that, like, the producer of the program pitched a few Spanish pieces of 8 into the swamp so that they'd find one, right? You can't tell. But if you watch what's happening since and the science behind it, that question has been absolutely answered. They have, I mentioned the lead cross that was made from lead that was mined in the Templar region of France from a mine that closed in 1400. They found that. You see them find it, and it's legit on the beach a couple of seasons ago. They found a Roman crossbow bolt. The bolt, that's like a foot long on the beach. Now, beach finds you have no contextual data. Like if it's in sediment, you can tell where it came from. If it's on the beach, you can't. It's just laying there on the rocks, right? But it's still a fucking Roman crossbow bolt. What does that do? So those are the kinds of things that, and I mentioned the ox shoes and the roadway system, the incredibly complex tunnel systems, and the labor force and behind it, and the discipline required to leave the island free of any debris or evidence that there were hundreds of people working there for long periods of time. It seems to me, anyway. So here's why, I guess, in summary, it could have been the Knights Templar, because this is Temple Mount, and that's kind of what we're talking about. So the Knights Templar were in control of Temple Mount in Jerusalem from the time of the conclusion of the Crusades, when they captured the Holy Land. They were put in charge of the Temple Mount. And they had control of it, I think, for about 150 years, till the Muslims pushed them back out, and they were slowly pushed out of their different fortress cities that they held. Their last one was in Accra. It was incredibly complex. They had their own fleet, of course, their own army, their own castles, and they were very sophisticated engineers. So if you think about the complexity of building a castle, for example, it dwarfs the effort that would be required to create the complexity I'm describing on Oak Island. So the Templars built castles. They knew about engineering and architecture. They knew about tunnels and booby traps. And they knew a lot about treasure, because in the century and a half that they controlled the Temple Mount, obviously what they did, intentionally what they did, is they went and looked for what everyone had been hiding in the subterranean structures of the Temple Mount since the time of King Solomon. So we're talking about thousands of years of continuous habitation of Temple Mount, with 150 years interrupting it of Christian occupation. That would be the only time in human history that Christians have controlled the Temple Mount, right? So the Knights Templar, among everything else, were kind of archaeologists and grave robbers in their own right. They were digging up what was there. They were, in Hitler's view, stealing esoteric secrets about how to create power and control energy in the world. But they were also looking for what we would call the holy relics. And this would have been, goes all the way back to the Ark of the Covenant of the Old Testament, and let's say the Holy Grail of the New Testament. All of these artifacts would have been precious to the point that they would have been stored. Where else would you store them but the Temple Mount? And so what the previous occupiers of the Temple Mount had done was built an underground city under the mound. It's not just the tabernacle on top or the Solomon's Temple. It's this incredible underground infrastructure because that's where you can put things away so that even if they conquer your fortress above, they won't find this thing that you have below. So these would have been the most precious treasures of the Holy Land, were all reposited at Temple Mount. So whatever those things were, the only people who would have deported them, taken them somewhere else, would be the Templars, because they were, after 150 years of excavation, pushed out by the Muslims. And so they had a fleet. They had Accra was their big port city and their last stronghold to fall. So they had plenty of opportunity and reason to move their most precious items from Jerusalem to Accra, and then you put it on ships, and now you can take it wherever you want. So in the other episodes, I talk about where it might have gone. It may have gone to France. It may have gone to Portugal. Scotland was under Robert the Bruce was one of the last. Portugal and Scotland were among the last Templar monarchies or fiefdoms, if you will, and so those would be obvious transit routes. But again, the Catholic world was against the Templars at this point, and so they would need a new place to safeguard their most precious treasures. So wherever they left from in Western Europe with their fleet of ships and their highly disciplined monastic order of, celibate warriors who had taken vows of poverty, they could easily have orchestrated the deportation of their precious treasures to the New World. Now, the New World was well known by the Vikings, and the Vikings were extant throughout North America. The oldest proven habitation, European habitation in North America, is a place called Lance, L'Anseo, Meadows, in Newfoundland on the east coast of Canada. And I think it goes back to the 11th century. So if the Vikings knew about it, the Knights Templar would have tortured enough Vikings that they would know that there was a new world, and they could sail their ships there too. So if we spin that out, the Templars have been pushed out of the Holy Land, are now in Western Europe. The Catholic Church is against them. They need to hide their most precious stuff. They have ships, and they have workers, and they have discipline, resources, architectural expertise. So they would have taken it to the safest place. Where would that be? Not Iceland, not Greenland. They'd bring it over to North America. The first place you can dig a big hole would be Nova Scotia. And there you find a hidden bay with 100 islands. And one of its most secretive islands, you can actually have an encampment and spend the time necessary to prepare the infrastructure, the tunnels and chambers and booby traps, before the ship comes over with the treasure. And then they deposit the treasure, remove all evidence of their attendance there, bury the roads under many feet of dirt, and leave and let nature take its course, and it all gets grown over. So that would kind of be the what seems to be what happened based on the evidence that they present in the 9 seasons of the History Channel program. And I'll just take a breath in the gulp there.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. That's a great description, and I think we kind of broke down in our last episodes that, at least to me, the most promising theory is that this is where the holy relics, like you mentioned, which is the Spear of Destiny, the Grail of the Covenant, right, the Holy Grail, a piece of the true cross of Jesus Christ, and also
you mentioned Ark of the
Spear of Destiny, the Chalice, the Ark of the Covenant,
the Holy Grail,
and a piece of the true cross. As far as I know, those are the 4 most secret treasures that might be there.
Right.
And then God knows what else, right?
That's right. Because as I was just thinking about this, from whom did the Knights Templar, who did they push out in order to take possession? They pushed out the Muslims.
So it went back and forth through the period of the Crusades between the Templars and the Muslims. They traded hands. But there was even recording that the Templars did recover the Spear of Destiny under the Temple Mount. So they were besieged, they were losing the war, they were demoralized, they excavated under the temple while they were being besieged by Saladin. They found what they said was the Spear of Destiny, and people dispute whether it was or wasn't, but either way, it has such a positive effect on their morale that they went on to win a series of victories. So whatever that artifact was, whether that was the true Spear of Destiny or not, it would only make sense that they would have kept that as a holy relic because they won all those battles after recovering it.
Yeah.
For those that don't know what the Spear of Destiny is, that's the spear that they used to kill Jesus and stab him while he was on the cross.
Yeah.
Right?
So all of these artifacts, right? A piece of the true cross is obviously the cross he was nailed to. It might also have people think the nails that went in his hands and feet. And then the Roman soldier took the spear and they stabbed him in the stomach to make sure that he was dead. And it says water and blood came out of his wounds, and they caught it in a chalice, and that chalice is the Holy Grail of Round Table fame, right? So, of course, our previous server was the Round Table, and the whole mythos there is about King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table questing for the Holy Grail. Ultimately, Sir Galahad finds it, but that was the Grail that I guess a Jewish Pharisee or something used to catch the blood and water from Christ's wound, and that was considered to represent immortality as well as to bestow immortality on whoever found it.
Super interesting.
So this summer, they're doing another excavation, and this is funded by many, many millions of dollars because it's the History Channel's most popular program entering its 10th season, and it's developing a global kind of following of nerds like me. There's also this book by Randall Sullivan, which is kind of just a lot of really fascinating stories. Among them, I'll just mention, is this idea of dark forces that are extant on Oak Island itself. And so there's an account here of one of the guys who's still on the TV show, Dan Henske, who has had a number of episodes that you might call demonic possession or bipolar frenzies, where he felt in one that his throat was being slashed, and in another he ended up swimming off the island to the mainland naked, wearing only a construction helmet, like in a panic. There's another story in here about this muscular night watchman that they hired in the 1800s to protect the premises, and he fled the island in a terror at night after being grabbed by a night demon with red eyes and fur in his bed, and who told him to get off the island. And his wife, who told the story, said she saw the bruise marks on his arms of these fingers that had held him, and he refused to ever go back to the island again. So there is that sort of notion that there is anecdotal evidence that there would be a curse enacted on the island, and why wouldn't there be if a spiritual order which had access to the secrets of the Jewish, Muslim, and Christian worlds were hiding their most precious treasures, right? You believe in spiritual power. So anyone comes near this, not only do you get booby-trapped, but you get cursed. And there are demons protecting your treasure. So that's a fascinating thread of evidence as well. And it's not just recreational entertainment, because even in the 10 years of the TV show, like, their equipment always breaks or malfunctions, and there are all of these inexplicable pieces of data that there's a possibility that the money pit that they've been working on all these years is actually a ruse. There's no treasure there at all. The treasure's on the other side of the island, and they built this incredibly complex structure so that everybody would dig over there. And
that's pretty smart.
Isn't it? Yeah, exactly. Right. And so I would just say, it's, if you're curious, this show will sort of start airing in October, and maybe the 10th season will be the one, and the 220, I think, 8th year of the search that they actually uncover what the treasure is.
And honestly, Oak Island, Curse of Oak Island on History Channel, you should sponsor the Temple Mount podcast. We're giving you great publicity right now. But in all honesty, it's a fascinating, incredibly fascinating situation. Directly ties into the Temple Mount, the Knights Templar, and all the other things we talk about here. And wouldn't it be crazy if, next year or something, they found some crazy artifact directly related to the Third Temple or the Knights Temple, so...
I want to throw in one other thing, which is, and I've mentioned this in the second episode, I think, that we did, which is the direct connection between Shogun and Oak Island, if you will. So, last night we had supper with my mother, Shogun and I. So that's 3 generations, right? My mother is 94 years old, and her father, my grandfather, was born in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia. And that's in Lunenburg, Lunenburg is a UNESCO World Heritage Site for its architecture and antiquity. Okay. And that's where Shogun's great-grandfather was born. He was gassed in the First World War, and anyway,
that's mustard gas.
Mustard gas. Yeah. But in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia, there's a museum house, an historic house called Knaut House, Knaut. Okay. My mother, who we had dinner with last night, her maiden name, the name she was born with, was Knaut, and that name goes back to Germany. It's a Germanic name. And it has roots in that can be traced to the Templars, to the Knights Templar. So that's the potential, not verified, biological connection. But there's definitely a geographical connection. That is, my grandfather was born in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia, which is the main town on Mahone Bay, in which Oak Island is an island. So if my grandfather, as he would have, was paddling a boat around as a teenager, like teenagers do before internal combustion engines, they would have visited Oak Island. So Shogun's you'd go to the island where there's a 100-year-old legend of pirate treasure, right? Wouldn't you go there?
You might. It's a speculative possibility, but at least it's I guess it's hypothetically possible, right?
I would say it's quite likely, reasonably likely that, but so that's just a lineage. So there's potentially a bloodline connection, and there's absolutely and provably a biological connection.
Yeah, well, and there's certainly a spiritual connection. Like, I don't know why, right? But part of the mythos of the server is I never actually chose the name The Round Table. That was just kind of came out of the ether, and I was like, holy shit, that's the name. And in the same regard, when I chose the name the Temple Mount, I said, what are we going to call the server? And this is not, I've never had this experience before. Literally a voice said Temple Mount. It was instant. I said, what is the server going to be called? I said Temple Mount. No second, I didn't consider 2 options. I didn't consider 3. I was just like, yeah, that's it. And that's what it is. But then you realize the Temple Mount connects to the Knights Templar. It connects to King Solomon. It connects to the Muslims in Jerusalem. It connects to the Crusades. It connects to Oak Island through the Templars. And I just think that's amazing that just like the Round Table, which I didn't choose but was kind of given to us, connected to Galahad and the Holy Grail, and the Holy Grail connects to the Templars, and the Templars connect to Oak Island, and Oak Island connects to the Third Temple. And I'm just like, what the heck's going on, right?
Yeah.
And that ties right back into what we call the Spiral Code. And those of you guys who haven't heard it should listen to the podcast Spiral Code episode 2 with Crimson and I, and we will continue to build on that series. But really the whole thing is the Spiral Code. It's this weird web of synchronicities and connections. Like Oak Island is in Canada, right? That's bizarre. Like, it's Canada. Why would that have anything to do with the Jerusalem and the relics of the Crusades? Was in Canada. We're in Canada. You know what I mean? It's like, it's crazy. And my dad's into Oak Island, and that's completely independent from me and the server. Like, it's all connected, but not intentionally, except by a higher purpose.
So. Yeah, and also everybody, I mean, millions of people are watching this kind of reality TV series unfold, because it's the discovery of what is there will completely rewrite not only the history of North America, but the history of the world, right? Like, I don't see any way around that.
It could likely be one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of all time, and it has a very real possibility to hold one of the prophetic eschatological end times keys, such as some kind of relic that is just religiously eschatological, like game changing. Like, that's why I think about this with this ridiculous degree they went to. I'm a Warhammer 40,000 fan. If I was excavating Oak Island and all these traps and pits and deceptions, yeah, you'd be thinking treasure. I'd be thinking, is there a fucking demon at the bottom of this that they wanted to make sure never got out? Like a vampire, a demon that they bound down here? It's not treasure, right? You're looking for treasure. They wanted to make sure no one would ever find this. If it was treasure, they would have made it so they could easily go back and retrieve it because it's valuable. But for them to bury it so it could never be recovered makes me think this is going to be like something they were trying to prevent because they knew if it was unleashed, it could trigger the end times.
And that is, I mentioned that in our second podcast about Oak Island, that the connection between it and Armageddon, that is one of the signs of the end times would be the unleashing of the demonic forces.
The opening of the bottomless pit and unleashing Apollyon, the angel of the bottomless pit. Could the bottomless pit be the Oak Island pit?
Exactly. And that would be a reason for highly disciplined monastic soldier orders, right? To, like, I mean, here's, just do a little mental exercise with me, okay? You're going to build an 8-foot squared shaft, 150 feet down, and you have to crib the whole thing with like 4-inch oak planks, okay? 4x6 oak planks, and it's 150 feet deep, and you got 4 sides and you need posts for the corners. Every board has to be hand-sawn. You cut the tree down, square the tree, cut the boards, hew the boards with an axe to make one single board. Right? Like, we're looking at a deck here that's full of boards that were all made with power saws. Yeah. Every board, and now you go down. You have to go down hundreds of feet.
Excavation of material.
And then the distribution of that material. So there's no evidence that you did it. So it doesn't make any logical sense. Like this.
Every time in the past that something like this happened, it was like they would bury a pharaoh or something, and they'd have them make a thing, and then they'd kill everybody who did it, and then they'd kill everybody who buried those people, to make sure that nobody would rob the dude's tomb, right? Because he put all his treasures in his tomb and he didn't want you to know where it was, so he'd have all these people build it. So it could be something like that.
There was one thing that really stood out to me in what you said is, so obviously there was this big, huge, long tunnel or like a descending chamber that was filled with booby traps, and you said at the bottom they found a stone, and that stone had an inscription on it. So this gives me massive national treasure vibes. So at the end of the day, the Templars were never something. They were not people who obviously hid their secrets. They were an abundantly secret order, which, based on my research, they were basically the greatest treasures that the Templar were hiding were treasures that related to technology, and specifically lost ancient technology. That I believe Sign uses the word antiquitech, which is basically the idea that all of the ancient temples and cathedrals around the world used to be part of a large energetic grid system that also connected with the pyramids that are also all over the world. And basically the antiquitech technologies that the Templar basically knew how it worked and had all the patents on. Well, I don't even know if there were patents really back then, but they basically held all that knowledge and kept it massively secret because of the ramifications of that technology being available to people who should not have it. And as Shogun knows too, part of my theory too is the Templar, even the name itself, Templar, basically means a time guardian. So they had some sort of guardianship of the world, and specifically the timeline that we align ourselves with. And they're all the to the Templars are intricately also connected to basically Jesus and the Knights of the Round Table. All of these things, it's just amazing, the intricate connections. But you said there was an inscription on this stone. Like I said, this gives me a national treasure vibe. Do you know what that inscription said? Did they produce that?
So that is one of the really exasperating things about this whole story, is that the stone has been lost. So we know there was a stone, and we know it was recovered, and there are transcriptions of the syllabics that you can find online. But the stone itself, because the people didn't value antiquities in the same way in the past, it was last seen in the window of a printing shop in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and people have lost track of it. So it's not actually scientifically possible to validate the interpretations of what that said. You can't look at it yourself or take a picture or do your own rubbing. So that's a real pisser, because it would be nice if we just had that, right? You could compare it. It's been called runic and other things, but there are symbols in it that look like they're Templar, but it isn't a direct causal link, if you know what I mean.
Very, very.
And that.
It's very, very unfortunate that we would lose such an important treasure to the puzzle, because if the whole thing was just a ruse, was just a cover, that they made this extravagant booby trap thing just to get people bamboozled into digging in the wrong place, like that stone might have been the only clue that would reveal us the right direction of where this actual treasure is. And like I said, I don't think, just like you don't think, that the treasure is a bunch of gold. I do believe that it is either some sort of ancient relic, which also could be some form of ancient hidden technology that we no longer have any record of.
Yeah, that agreed. And I am completely convinced that there is no credible explanation for the effort and complexity of what was done that could be financially motivated. Because if all you were hiding was money, it's like, you want to drive up to the ATM and get your money, right? You don't do all of this to hide money. So what is it that is non-monetary that is of such a value that it would warrant this effort? That's the kind of question that faces humanity, really. And I'd love to. I really look forward to knowing the answer. But it hasn't. The answer to the question of who did it or why they did it, even though you can look at all the stuff they've found and dug up, and it's astonishing. But it doesn't answer the question of who, why, how, or especially what the hell is down there. And what happens when we dig it up? I have no idea.
I mean, I do like the idea that the bottomless pit, right? Because the further they go down in Oak Island, they keep finding level after level after level. No matter how deep they go, they keep finding more. But not only they keep finding deeper levels, they keep triggering traps. They like flood it with water. So it's like not only is it going further and further down, but people are being like, no, stop. Like, don't go any further. Don't go any further. Like, trying to stop you from going down. So I don't really think it's the bottomless pit, but I do think it's an interesting, at least metaphorical possibility. This has been great. We've covered really everything we needed to.
Yeah, I think so.
So thank you so much, Hawthorne, again, for putting us up, me and Crimson.
That's my boy.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is the third podcast we've done. Check out Oak Island 1 and 2. That makes this a trilogy. And so grateful for all the hospitality the church family showed me out here. Everybody did. And God bless everybody. Remember, do not take the mark of the beast. That being said, join us on the Temple Mount Discord server. Like, follow, subscribe, Odyssey, SoundCloud, YouTube, and BitChute. And now let's go to the Templar Tavern, and we will continue to celebrate for the rest of the night.